You're still here? The voice came quietly but firmly, surprising in the late-night silence. Emma Wilson jumped, her fingers freezing on the keyboard. The office had sunk into its usual after-hours calm, with only the distant hum of the climate control, the soft ticking of the wall clock, and the faint blue glow of computer screens left in standby mode. She slowly turned her head. At the far end of the corridor, outlined by the light from the emergency exit sign, stood a tall man dressed in a dark, well-fitted suit. He remained motionless, simply watching her with a calm and silent gaze. "Yes, sir," Emma answered cautiously. "I'm just finishing up." The man gave a slight nod and then disappeared around the corner without another word. It was only when the elevator doors closed behind him that Emma realized who it was: Mark Gallagher, CEO of Gallagher and Finch. Her chest tightened. "He saw me sitting at someone else's desk, typing as if I owned the project. If your heart tightened too when Mark stood there, quietly watching, give Emma a like. She does not crave praise, but she deserves to be noticed. Also, don't forget to share in the comments where you're watching from. Perhaps someone nearby is following Emma's journey at the exact same moment as you. Yet it hadn't always been like this. Just a few hours earlier, she was tidying her things, laptop tucked in her tote, earbuds wrapped carefully, her coat already over her arm, when she heard the sudden, sharp sound of a chair scraping the floor. She glanced down the hallway and spotted Connor Lewis, junior associate in the brand team, slumped over his desk as if the air had been knocked out of him. His complexion was pale and his eyes fixed on the flickering screen ahead. "Number... No, 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 what on earth?" he whispered, clutching the edge of the desk. Emma Wilson hesitated, not knowing him well since he had only spoken to her maybe twice during the 6 weeks of her internship. Yet something in the frantic, cracked tone of his voice, not angry but desperate, made her step closer. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, maintaining a respectful distance. He turned to her, startled. "The files are gone," he said. "The pitch deck for the morning presentation, it's completely vanished." "Now, the campaign deck, yes," he snapped. Then his voice softened a little. "I was adding new graphs, and something must have overwritten it. Now it's all blank." Emma leaned forward slightly. "Is there a backup?" He shook his head. "That's corrupted, too. I think I accidentally overwrote the cache folder when I..." He stopped, then looked at her. "You're good with data retrieval, right? I heard someone say you helped IT last week." Emma blinked. "I know some basics. I can try. I can't stay. I need to get home and prepare the oral presentation. Just see what you can do." Before she could answer, he was already putting on his coat, mumbling something about having dinner with his fiancée and needing at least a few hours of rest. Emma stood there shocked as Connor Lewis shoved a USB into her hand, leaving her with a problem that was not hers, not her campaign, not her department. Not even the fact that her shift had extended beyond 9 p.m. deterred her now. Emma Wilson was here with her sleeves rolled up, striving to retrieve his file from the system's temporary folders and autosave logs by herself. Her stomach growled. She had not eaten since lunch. Her eyes felt heavy, yet her hands persisted, driven by an unusual calm determination. Not because Connor Lewis deserved it, but because she did. Leaving felt like surrendering to a system that already expected her to disappear around 10:30 p.m. At last, she discovered a partial backup. With some reconstruction and design corrections, it might be sufficient. Not perfect, but acceptable. She reformatted the charts, tweaked the fonts, corrected the slide figures, and even placed placeholder visuals for the missing content. She was nearly finished when that familiar sensation of being observed crept over her, followed by a voice. "You are still here." Mark Gallagher spoke without raising his tone, not angry or surprised, merely attentive, studying her as if she were a detail in his own building that had previously escaped his notice. The break room was empty once more. The only sound was the clicking of her laptop keys. Emma let out a breath, saved the file, slipped the USB into a folder labeled Connor Final, and leaned back. She could have left, walked away the moment he departed, but she did not. Not because anyone instructed her, but because something inside refused to allow something so carelessly broken to remain that way. Somewhere above, perhaps on the 21st floor, where the executive offices glowed with blue-white silence, a man in the suit had witnessed the same scene, and for once, Emma Wilson wished he would recall the morning clearly. The sun moved gently across the glass front of Gallagher and Finch, casting warm golden streaks along the carpeted hallway as the office slowly awoke. Yet Connor Lewis had arrived even earlier than usual. His coat was impeccably pressed, his stride light and effortless, as he passed the reception desk with a coffee in one hand and a Bluetooth earpiece tucked neatly in his right ear. His smile showed no trace of the panic from the night before. Emma, sitting 2 rows away in the digital strategy space, noticed him from the corner of her eye. He did not look her way, did not stop or speak, offered no nod, no thanks, nothing at all. He walked directly to the executive conference room at the end of the hall, where the morning's pitch to the leadership team was about to start. Emma remained still for a moment, watching him disappear behind the frosted glass doors. She then lowered her gaze to her screen, the gentle buzz of incoming emails, barely making an impact in her ears. Her own coffee sat untouched, now lukewarm, a quiet emblem of the night she had sacrificed, working for someone else's recognition. The presentation deck she had stayed late to fix, the graphs she had reconstructed from memory, the branding tweaks she had perfected just before midnight, the slide transitions she had smoothed to make everything flow effortlessly, were all being showcased now, as if Connor's work alone. Minutes slipped by, then 10, then 15. Inside the glass room came the sound of laughter and applause. Then another Connor stood by the monitor, confidently pointing at a slide Emma instantly recognized. The color scheme, the design. She even recalled retyping the title Momentum Through Message Clarity, because Connor's original had said, "Move forward by talking straight." Through the glass, Emma noticed heads nodding. A woman near the table's end leaned forward to comment, while another executive made a circular gesture, signaling, "Keep it going." Then Mark Gallagher walked into the room. He remained standing at the back with arms crossed, silently observing from Emma's vantage point at her desk. Emma felt frozen. That same electric energy from last night quietly filled the space, even without words. Her breath paused briefly as she leaned back, reflecting on the USB drive, the long hours, and how Connor had left with scarcely a word, leaving her to clean up the mess. Now he stood there beneath harsh fluorescent lights, basking in praise that did not belong to him alone. Yet Emma did not feel anger, not entirely. She was accustomed to being unseen, expected to deliver more with less. Interns, especially those who looked like her, were not meant to leave traces. They were supposed to erase them. Suddenly, applause erupted from inside the conference room. The presentation had been approved. Connor smiled, gathered his laptop, and exchanged handshakes with a board member, his pace quickening as he left. Contentment filled the room as everyone applauded except for one individual, Mark Gallagher. He remained motionless in the corner, his gaze fixed on the final slide displayed on the screen. Emma Wilson had inserted it just moments before powering down her laptop close to midnight. It was a subtle touch. A white quote against a soft blue background placed delicately between the company emblem and the farewell message. Clarity is earned through effort, not volume. She had kept its origin a secret. It was not showy, simply sincere. Mark's eyes tightened slightly as the executives gradually exited, exchanging light conversations. He then stepped forward toward the still plugged-in laptop, tapping a few keys to examine its metadata. The timestamp on the system indicated the last edit was at 11:57 p.m., unlike anything Connor Lewis would do, and Mark Gallagher understood that instantly. Turning to peer through the glass wall at the workstations below, he scanned until his gaze settled on Emma. She was immersed in typing, focused and composed, pretending her surroundings held no significance to her. Yet Mark did not avert his stare. He noticed her and recalled the previous evening, the vacant hallway, the flickering screen, her shoulders bent as she leaned toward her work, not seeking recognition but driven by purpose. He refrained from calling her name or sending a message, but as he exited the room, a subtle change crossed his face, a quiet acknowledgement, a preserved memory to revisit later. One morning, as Emma Wilson was pouring herself more tea in the break room, Connor Lewis walked past, speaking on the phone about how smooth the deck's flow seemed and how impressed the client team would be with the revised metrics. Still no acknowledgement, still no glance. Emma slowly sipped her tea, the bitterness steadying her. She did not require his thanks because someone in that room understood, and that person's opinion was what truly mattered. Sitting at her desk, fingers resting above the keyboard, the soft afternoon light filtered through the tall office windows. like a delicate silk curtain. The office felt calmer now, caught in the quiet after the presentation. People scrolled through emails or stepped out for overpriced coffee. She could hear the distant laughter of colleagues, the crinkle of a sandwich wrapper 2 desks away, the clicking of dress shoes in the hallway. She remained still, not yet moving because her email was still open on the screen. The message came from Mark Gallagher. Subject line: meeting request, time 4 o'clock p.m., location executive office on the 21st floor. The body read simply, "Please join me briefly this afternoon." Just one word, briefly. No explanation, no clues, only the CEO's name resting heavily at the top of her inbox as if it were a stone pressing on her chest. She must have reviewed it at least 5 or maybe 10 times by now. Emma had never communicated with Mark Gallagher before, neither directly nor officially. She recalled seeing him once months ago, walking through the office, surrounded by 3 vice presidents and a project manager carrying a clipboard. He had not made eye contact with anyone, seemingly uninterested or simply unbothered. So why now? Is everything all right, she wondered. She blinked and turned, because Dana appeared at her desk again, holding a— Emma looked pale as if she had seen a ghost, Dana said with a light tone. Emma swallowed hard. "I have a meeting with Mr. Gallagher," she replied softly. Dana's eyebrows rose. "Mark Gallagher?" Emma nodded quietly while the clock ticked. "He is in 20 minutes. Emma's throat tightened as if her voice was caught somewhere deep inside. Dana leaned closer and lowered her voice. "Don't worry. He doesn't bring people in just to fire them. At least not interns." She smiled warmly in an attempt to calm her down. "Just be yourself." Emma returned a half-hearted smile before turning back to her screen, hoping to type away the nervous energy. At 3:58, Emma stood in front of the elevator, her palms slightly sweaty, clutching her notebook and trying her best to maintain calm posture. Inside, she pressed the button for the 21st floor and felt the subtle sensation as the elevator ascended, each floor number glowing softly like a heartbeat. When the doors opened at the top, she entered a quieter environment filled with glass, silence, and a sense of spaciousness between everything. The air carried a faint scent of cedar mixed with something richly expensive. The assistant was waiting for her. "Miss Wilson, Mr. Gallagher will see you now," she said as the door opened almost soundlessly. Mark stood by the window, hands in his pockets, gazing out over the skyline. The view stretched across the city, with Chicago's rooftops and the traffic below looking like silver ants, while Lake Michigan appeared as a frozen sheet far in the distance. He did not turn right away. "Please, have a seat," he finally said. Emma settled into one of the leather chairs. Placing her notebook gently on her lap, the space around them felt minimalistic and masculine. Yet it was not cold, only deliberately arranged. After a brief pause, Mark finally turned toward her, his face unreadable, but with eyes that were calm and steady rather than harsh. "I saw your coworker present this morning," he began. Emma nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. The presentation was clear and well organized, surprisingly so." A brief silence followed before he moved closer, pulled out a chair opposite her, and sat down, removing any desk or barrier between them. "You completed it, didn't you?" he asked plainly. Emma started to speak but closed her mouth. The truth hung delicately between them. "I helped," she said cautiously. Mark tilted his head. "Helped?" "He lost the original." She added more firmly. "Yes, I stayed late to rebuild whatever I could." He nodded, not questioning her, and continued. "And he gave you the responsibility?" Emma hesitated, then gave a slight nod. Leaning back just a bit but keeping his gaze locked on hers, Mark asked, "Why?" The question struck deeper than she had expected. She exhaled slowly and replied, "Because I knew it had to be done, and no one else would finish it on time, even though it was not your duty, especially since it was not mine either." He blinked, not with disapproval, but as if noting the detail. "And you did not consider telling anyone this morning?" Emma shifted in her seat. "I wasn't certain if it was appropriate." Mark looked at her. "You mean you were unsure if it would help or harm?" She met his eyes steadily. "Yes." He nodded slowly again. Quiet settled between them and beyond. The city buzzed softly like a distant hum. From across the room, Mark reached out to the side table and took hold of a thin folder. He set it between them and flipped it open. Inside was a printed version of the campaign presentation. A red pen had circled a small point near the bottom of the last slide. Clarity comes from effort and not from quantity. He tapped the line. That is your work, right, Emma? Her lips parted, but no words escaped. Mark did not push her. He simply nodded once more as if acknowledging a familiar truth. My father used to say something similar, he murmured, though not as gracefully. She gave a gentle smile. My mother says that about raising children nowadays. He smiled briefly, the expression fading almost instantly as he closed the folder. I wanted to meet the person who made the recovery last night possible. But even more so, I wanted to meet the person who understands when to take action and when to hold back. Emma exhaled, uncertain if she had been holding her breath. You have demonstrated more wisdom in one evening than some colleagues show in 3 years, he said. Thank you, she whispered. Mark stood up. We are selecting candidates for an internal leadership development program, not part of the internship. She looked up sharply. He continued, I want your name on the short list. She blinked. I do not know what to say. You already said it, Mark replied. You stayed. As she rose to leave, he added one last quiet remark, almost to himself. In this company, everyone notices who truly shines. I focus on those who glow in the darkness. Emma Wilson left the office with her heart pounding faster than it had all morning. Something unseen had shifted, not within the company but inside herself. The rest of the day blurred by. Yet for Emma Wilson, something had changed quietly and unmistakably. She returned to her desk after the meeting with Mark Gallagher, with a calmness that felt strange, as if borrowed from someone else. Her hand still trembled slightly when she reached for the mouse, but the breath in her chest had steadied. She no longer felt as though she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall. Her inbox, as usual, was overflowing with messages from the design team, an update about the intern lunch scheduled for Friday, and a reminder to submit timesheets. Nothing extraordinary, nothing out of the ordinary. Still, she read every message as if searching for hidden clues in a story she had not written. Connor Lewis passed by her desk twice that afternoon, once carrying a new wireless headset and once laughing on the phone about a follow-up with leadership. Not a single word was spoken to her, not even a glance. Yet this time, it did not sting the way it used to because someone had noticed her. The person who mattered had looked beyond her title and badge, beyond the silence, and had truly seen her. Despite that, a feeling of unfinished business lingered beneath her skin like static. That evening, long after most of the office had emptied, Emma sat alone before her screen. The clock neared 8:45. At 8 o'clock in the evening, the hallway lights had already dimmed and the cleaning staff had not shown up yet. Somewhere down the corridor, she could hear the faint hum of the vending machine as it dispensed someone's late-night snack. She really should have gone home by now. Her mother had texted her several hours ago saying, Are you working late again, baby? Don't skip dinner. She had replied with a thumbs-up emoji. It was not exactly a lie, but definitely not the full truth either. On her screen was the original campaign folder for Connor Lewis's project, all the raw files she had kept a backup copy of just in case. As she scrolled carefully through it now, she could clearly see how disjointed it was. Notes lacked any connection, graphs were taken from outdated sources, and the design aimed more to dazzle than to inform. She recalled what Mark Gallagher had told her. You have shown more judgment in one single evening than some associates manage in 3 years. That sentence resonated differently now, not as praise, but as a weight of responsibility. Because the reality was, Emma Wilson had not just lent a hand. She had reconstructed the entire thing from scratch. Her cursor hovered over the completed presentation. She clicked on it, not to modify, but just to confirm it was truly finished. Then she noticed something peculiar on slide 17, the one presenting the impact metrics. She frowned as she spotted a set of statistics she had never entered herself. She knew this because she had deliberately left that part blank. The data was still unrecoverable. Yet there, it was filled in, dated and properly labeled though, without any identifiable source. The figures looked impressive, even convincing, but Emma could not shake the feeling that something was off. She immediately recognized the numbers were inflated. Too flawless, too polished. Emma Wilson scrolled through the notes. Connor Lewis had returned to the file earlier that morning and subtly modified it, just enough to leave his mark. Yet the figures were incorrect, altered intentionally. This was no mistake, but a deliberate act. She leaned back in her chair, a tight knot forming in her stomach. This issue went beyond not receiving credit. It was about honesty, about someone twisting her hard work into a false narrative. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could ignore it, pretend she did not notice. The file had already been approved, and no one would double-check unless a client raised concerns. Alternatively, she could speak up, but how would that appear? An intern accusing a permanent employee of data manipulation after the CEO had already praised the project. After Connor had claimed the success, she stood and paced between desks. The quiet office felt heavy, enveloping her like a thick curtain. Her shoes tapped softly on the carpet. Nearby, a floor lamp emitted a faint buzz. If she stayed silent, no one would know. No one would fault her. Yet she sat back down and opened her email, composing a message to Mark Gallagher titled, "Clarification on Campaign Data Slide 17. She stared at the blinking cursor and then erased the draft. Not yet. She needed more certainty. Opening Slack, she sent a message to Andy, the night shift IT technician, Emma Silent. Emma Wilson asked a random favor, requesting someone to check the version history on the campaign deck from the previous night. Mark Gallagher quickly responded within a minute, asking if she meant Connor Lewis. Emma confirmed and mentioned that someone had edited the deck that morning, and she just wanted to verify. Mark replied at 9:07 p.m., confirming the timestamp showed an edit at 7:21 a.m. from Connor's login. Slides 12, 17, and 21 had been modified, Emma noted. That was all she needed. Now Emma felt certain, even though everything had changed. She leaned back in her chair, staring out at the city beyond the window. The lights flickered softly like tiny pulses. In the distance, trains hissed as people finished dinner, watched late-night shows, and laughed. But inside this glass box, reality bent easily under the surface polish. Emma took a deep breath and reopened Outlook. This time, she did not write to Mark. Instead, she sent a detailed note to herself with timestamps, screenshots, and a complete record of what had been edited, when and how it differed from the final version she approved. It was not an accusation, but a careful log, because Emma refused to rush or be naive. She wasn't pretending either. As she saved the draft, she glanced toward the hallway, the same corridor where Mark had appeared the night before. Whispering quietly to herself, she said steady and calm, "No more invisible lines." Then she closed her laptop, gathered her belongings, and left the building. Not as an intern finishing another long day, but with purpose. The morning after crossing into something more profound, Emma Wilson arrived at the office earlier than usual. The cold winter breeze still clung to her coat, and her fingers were nearly numb from the train ride. She held tightly to a travel mug filled with gas station coffee, but barely noticed the taste because her mind was too noisy. She had hardly slept. The faulty presentation, the one Connor Lewis had tampered with, remained in her draft folder along with her private notes. No one else had seen it yet, but it was there now, a tangible choice standing in front of her, a silent invitation. She nodded to herself, acknowledged the moment, walked past the front desk, nodded at the security guard, and entered the digital strategy department's open space. The office lights were just beginning to flicker on, and the air carried a faint scent of lemon disinfectant mixed with the sharpness of fresh toner. Mark Gallagher was already there, perched on the edge of his desk, casually chatting with two colleagues from marketing as if he had not desperately faked half his metrics just 12 hours earlier. He laughed freely and effortlessly, a coffee cup in one hand, phone in the other. When he spotted Emma, he gave a brief, friendly wave, the kind that felt almost brotherly, as if they shared a secret. She forced a tight smile and kept walking. "Emma," he called after her. She paused. "Hey, I wanted to thank you. You really nailed that project. Everyone said the flow was amazing." Her heart beat solid and loud. "That's what you told them?" she asked, her voice light. He just shrugged. "Well, I never said it was you, if that is what you meant. But I also never claimed it myself. People just assumed, and I allowed the presentation to speak for itself." She held his gaze on slide 17 even as Connor blinked. Her tone remained unchanged, but something in her eyes made him shift. "It's fine," he said swiftly. "We just boosted the figures to match our expectations for the coming quarter. No big deal. Everyone does it." She did not reply, only nodded and moved back to her workstation. Connor returned to his desk, still wearing a smile, but she noticed the laughter did not come as naturally. At 10:12 a.m., her inbox chimed with a message from Mark Gallagher. The subject read, "Dropped by, quick follow-up." It was unexpected, not scheduled, no assistant or calendar reminder. Just a brief, straightforward line. Her heart skipped a beat. She stood up, brushed away invisible lint from her blazer, and headed toward the elevator, her legs both numb and strangely light. The ride to the 21st floor was silent. Her reflection in the shiny chrome doors appeared older than it had 2 weeks earlier when she first entered Mark's office. He stood once again by the window, back turned to the entrance. She waited briefly before he turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Emma Wilson," he said. "Yes, sir," she replied. "I wanted to check in on something. Not official, just curiosity." She tilted her head slightly. He walked over to the side table, picked up a folder, and opened it. Inside was a printed copy of the campaign presentation, again, but this time there was a post-it note attached to slide 17, showing the forecasted figures. He explained, "I asked finance to verify these. They could not confirm them, at least not with the current information available." Emma felt her throat tighten. "I reviewed the metadata," Mark continued, wanting to be meticulous. "Slide 17 was last updated at 7:21 in the morning on the day of the pitch." He glanced up. "That was not you, was it?" "No, sir," she replied softly, allowing a moment to pass. She took a breath. "I finished the deck just before midnight." Then what was there must not have been what was presented in the meeting, which means someone else altered it. He did not press further, did not ask who. It was unnecessary. "I understand," he said simply, closing the folder and putting it aside. Then he asked, "Did you plan on telling me?" She faltered. "I wanted to be certain it wasn't a mistake, that I wasn't overreacting." Mark sat opposite her, his elbows gently resting on his knees. "Let me share what I saw," he began. "I witnessed an intern staying late to fix a project abandoned by someone else. I saw that same intern show judgment when the situation became complicated. Now I see her facing the choice again between comfort and honesty." He leaned back. "I don't expect perfection from interns, but I notice who already seems to grasp what leadership means." Emma remained still, her heart beating louder than before. "I am not here to ask you to betray anyone," he said quietly. "That is not how you create something lasting. But I do want to ask you one thing." She waited. "If this were your campaign," he said gently, "if your name was on that deck, would you have allowed those numbers to be accepted?" Her reply was immediate. "No." He nodded once, then said, "Then maybe it's worth reconsidering." At that moment, he stood up and walked over to his desk, picking up another file. "I have talked to HR," he said. "There is a vacancy in our internal development rotation. It is a fast-track, cross-departmental program designed for high-potential individuals." He slid the folder across the desk and added, "I would like you to officially consider applying." Emma Wilson did not reach out for it immediately, but asked softly, "What about Connor?" Mark Gallagher paused for a long moment before replying, "People like him eventually encounter limits they create themselves. My focus is not on penalizing him, but on building something superior to what he currently represents." Emma took the folder. It felt weightier than it appeared. She nodded slowly. "I will think about it." Mark said, "Good." And then Emma looked up as he added, "If you ever feel caught between invisibility and recognition, remember this moment and remind yourself that you earned it." As she left, her heartbeat steady and her gaze sharp, the silence in the elevator felt different. No longer empty, but filled with the weight of a choice. Friday morning came softly with a gentle snow that made the Chicago skyline sparkle through the tall windows of Galloway and Finch. Inside the office, there was an upbeat energy as the week came to a close. Conversations grew louder, schedules relaxed, and even the overused coffee machine seemed to sigh with less bitterness. Yet for Emma Wilson, the day unfolded in a completely different way. She had spent the previous night carefully going over the folder that Mark had handed her. Emma Wilson had received the outline for the leadership rotation program. It involved moving through different departments, presenting to actual clients, and receiving guidance from a senior executive. The schedule was tight, and the pressure was tangible. This was not a mere formality, it was a real opportunity. However, Emma had encountered enough situations like this in her life to understand that not every invitation was genuine. Despite her doubts, she completed the application form. As the office filled with the sounds of keyboards clicking and phones ringing, Emma quietly checked her calendar. Suddenly, an unexpected notification appeared. Quarterly all-staff town hall meeting at 10 o'clock a.m. on the 17th floor auditorium. She blinked in surprise. Nobody had mentioned the town hall before, and usually these events were planned weeks ahead. Attendance was mandatory. Most employees tolerated them with forced smiles and coffee in hand, while listening to VPs in tailored suits recite metrics and updates. Yet this meeting felt different because it had been announced at the very last moment. By 9:55, the elevators were crowded. Emma stood near the rear, squeezed between two finance managers, whispering about client budgets. When the doors opened on the 17th floor, a familiar buzz filled the room, projectors warming up, chairs being adjusted, and conversations that quieted down as people took their seats. Mark Gallagher stood to the side of the stage. No presentation slides were behind him, only a single wooden stool and a small wireless microphone in his hand. Emma found a seat at the back row, her heart racing, unsure of what was about to happen. Her heart raced as she wasn't quite sure what to expect, but certainly not this. Exactly at 10 o'clock in the morning, Mark Gallagher walked confidently to the center of the stage without any charts or introduction. "Good morning," he announced, and a hush fell over the audience. "I will keep this brief. We will skip the graphs, the dashboards, all the usual stuff." A subtle wave of laughter moved through the room. "Today," he went on, "I want to address something that cannot be captured in any spreadsheet, something we often only recognize when it is gone. Integrity. Quiet leadership. Doing what is right when no one is looking." Emma Wilson's fingers rested gently in her lap as he paused to assess the room. Earlier this week, Mark explained, a crucial campaign presentation was delivered to the leadership board. Most of you heard it was a success, that the numbers looked promising and the structure was solid. A few people nodded in agreement. Connor Lewis, sitting 3 rows back, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "But what you didn't hear," Mark continued, "was who created that presentation, who stayed late after everyone else had left, who meticulously fixed it after it had been mishandled." Connor straightened up. Emma remained still, suddenly breathless. Mark turned, scanning the crowd with searching eyes, until he found her. "In a company this size," he said, "it is easy to overlook those who keep things running smoothly behind the scenes, but not this time. Emma Wilson," he said calmly but with authority. "Will you please come up here?" The room fell silent as every eye focused on Emma. She froze for a moment, uncertain if she had heard correctly, then her legs suddenly felt unsteady beneath her as she moved forward. Her heart pounded with every step while whispers followed her path, some filled with curiosity, others with astonishment. Mark Gallagher extended his hand to help her onto the stage and said, "This is what true, quiet excellence looks like." Emma Wilson stood beside him, her eyes sweeping over a room full of strangers and coworkers, their faces now recognizing her presence as if she had been invisible yesterday and only appeared today because of her dedication, initiative, and integrity. Mark continued, "I am honored to announce that Emma has been officially chosen for our internal leadership rotation program, starting immediately." The audience erupted into applause, but it was not the usual polite clapping. It began softly and then grew genuine and filled with respect. For the first time since joining the company, Emma felt acknowledged instead of overlooked. As the applause dwindled, Mark added, "Our company does not advance through titles alone. It thrives on deeds and character, and Emma has reminded us of that this week." Turning to her, he said, "Congratulations." She nodded, her voice caught in her throat as she whispered, "Thank you." While stepping down, people stopped her with handshakes and quiet smiles. A manager from client relations leaned closer and told her, "It has been a long time since someone earned this the right way." Connor Lewis did not speak as she passed by. His silence conveyed everything that words could not. Back at her desk, Emma felt a newfound recognition that touched her deeply. Emma placed the folder down, her name clearly printed inside. She sat there gazing at the screen, the moment ringing inside her like a bell she never asked for. Recognition was something she had earned, and deep within the quiet corners of her soul, a voice softly said, "You belong here. not because others allowed you, but because you entered and remained. The Monday following the town hall meeting felt different. There was no noise, no grand celebration, nor a sudden change. But Emma Wilson sensed something subtle. It was in the pauses, the way people's eyes stayed just a bit longer as she passed, how colleagues who used to overlook her now stopped to give a nod of respect. Even the receptionist, who previously only asked for "badge, please," now greeted her with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Respect carried a presence, not heavy like guilt nor stiff as formality, but steady and earned. At her workstation, the email chains appeared familiar: brand briefs, scheduling, logistics, follow-ups. Yet her name now appeared higher up in the carbon copy lines, sometimes even among the primary recipients. Her Slack notifications increased, but no longer filled with meaningless banter, rather genuine teamwork. People were beginning to seek her insights instead of just her labor. Nevertheless, Emma refused to be swayed by the newfound attention. She understood how quickly the spotlight could fade, so she stayed focused, arrived early, listened twice as much as she spoke, and made sure her work was so flawless that no one could doubt her dedication. By Wednesday, Emma Wilson had officially been paired with a rotation mentor named Colleen Marsh, the director of strategic planning. Colleen had been part of the company since the early 2000s and was known for her keen insight, dry humor, and an extraordinary talent for spotting errors, even in a brief that lasted only 5 minutes. Their initial meeting occurred in Colleen's glass-enclosed office on the 20th floor. As Emma entered, she noticed the framed photos on the wall. One showed Colleen at a gala shaking hands with someone resembling a senator. Another caught her wearing a hard hat at a construction site in Detroit. On her desk, a small ceramic mug bore the phrase, "Don't bring me problems, bring me coffee." Colleen got straight to the point, saying, "I reviewed your file," while closing her laptop. Impressive judgment under pressure that is not easy to gain Mark Gallagher's trust since he avoids sentiment. Emma responded with a slight smile. "I have realized that. Let me be clear, this rotation involves genuine work. You will face office politics, pressure, and people who believe interns exist only to fetch coffee. Are you prepared for that?" Emma hesitated. "I might not be." Colleen studied her silently, then replied, "Good, because like it or not, it is already happening." In the days following, the impact of Emma's acknowledgement began to manifest in ways no official announcement could have anticipated. On Thursday, a janitor named Mr. Leonard, a gentleman in his 60s known for humming Stevie Wonder tunes while mopping, discovered a folded note on the counter of the 8th floor. In the kitchen, someone left an anonymous handwritten note that said, "Thank you." Beside it was a $15 gift card to a local diner and a post-it note that read, "Because someone noticed." Soon, the morning team and the facility's staff began receiving fresh donuts once every week. There were no announcements, no names, just a box, quietly appearing in Emma Wilson's own department. Things began to change as well when a junior analyst named Tina, who had always been reserved, spoke up during a brainstorming session. She proposed a completely new idea for a client's rebranding plan. The room fell silent. Usually that would have been it. But then Colleen turned to Emma and asked, "What do you think, Emma?" Emma responded, "It is risky but intelligent." Colleen agreed, "Then we should explore it." That moment opened something up, not only for Tina, but also for every quiet person holding back their thoughts. Even Connor Lewis changed, though he didn't show it openly. He avoided eye contact during meetings and kept his contributions brief. But one afternoon, Emma discovered a sticky note on her computer screen after returning from lunch. It said, "You didn't have to fix it, but you did. I won't forget that." It was a small gesture, yet it meant a lot because he hadn't said it aloud, but left it in silence where no one could misinterpret it. Mark Gallagher, for his part, remained distant. He did not hover or micromanage, yet in a brief encounter in the hallway, he locked eyes with her and said simply, "Keep going." That was all it took, but for Emma, it was enough. The positive effects continued to spread, and by Friday, the HR department introduced a new initiative. There was an initiative called Echo created to highlight behind-the-scenes efforts throughout the company. It was not based on job titles or nominations from managers. Instead, it focused on peer-to-peer recognition that could be anonymous if someone wished. Quiet yet meaningful moments were valued greatly. When asked about the motivation behind the effort, the HR director said, Sometimes the smallest gesture echoes the loudest. We were reminded of that just last week. Emma encountered this phrase during lunch. She did not show a smile outwardly, but felt a warmth inside as she recalled a moment from the past. Weeks ago, Emma had sat alone, piecing together a fractured campaign presentation that was not originally hers. She remembered the dim hallway lights, the stale smell of coffee, and the weight of silence surrounding her. Now, there were echoes of something different: respect, unity, and recognition. Later that evening, as the office space emptied and most colleagues headed to elevators or weekend engagements, Emma remained a little longer. She walked quietly down the corridor toward the break room. Outside, the city lights flickered through tall windows, while snowflakes continued to drift softly downward. Emma paused near the very spot where Mark first noticed her. For a brief instant, she pictured her reflection mingling with a memory of her former self, exhausted, uncertain, invisible. She whispered faintly, "You mattered even before they acknowledged you." Afterward, she turned off the lights, gathered her belongings, and proceeded toward the elevator. Her motivation was not obligation or fear, but something far deeper. Her purpose had shifted because now she moved with something deeper than mere ambition. She carried a certain weight. The next week unfolded with a serene stillness, the kind that settles in once storms have passed, yet leaves the atmosphere subtly altered. Emma Wilson arrived at the office shortly after dawn, her breath forming mist in the chilly morning air as she entered through the revolving glass doors of Gallagher and Finch. A fresh name badge fastened to her coat pocket read Readership Rotation Program Emma Wilson. She still hadn't grown accustomed to the way people regarded her, not with admiration or fear, but with recognition. She had transformed from that intern into someone else, and although most never completed the thought aloud, she understood what they meant. She was the one who remained the one who did not give up. By 8:30, she reached the 20th floor, settling into a small side office that Colleen had temporarily assigned. It was far from glamorous, just a simple desk, a phone, and a view of the narrow alley wedged between two buildings. But it was truly hers, and for the first time in her career, Emma had a place where she did not feel as if she was merely borrowing the air. Colleen passed by, carrying two folders tucked under one arm, and said, "You have 5 minutes to review the Walden brief. We're going over it with legal at 9. Maybe they have already started." Colleen raised one eyebrow. "Of course, you can." Emma smiled. Few impressed Colleen Marsh, but she was beginning to sense that this woman valued her, not because she was extraordinary, but because she was reliable and steady. The meeting started promptly at 9 o'clock. At 7 minutes past 9, Emma Wilson pointed out an error in a clause within the budget summary that no one else had noticed. At 28 minutes, she suggested using language that would be more appealing to clients. This adjustment prompted the head of the legal department to nod approvingly and jot down notes in his notebook. By 45 minutes past 9, the meeting concluded, and as people were leaving, Colleen whispered to Emma and herself, "Sharp eyes, quiet mouth, dangerous combination." Later that day, Emma received a message from Mark Gallagher's office. The message had no subject, only a location: conference room on the 21st floor, 5 o'clock in the evening. There were no instructions or warnings. Upon arrival, the room was empty and not cold, but sealed. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled out, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over Chicago. The skyline appeared gentle against a steel-gray sky. Emma found herself drawn toward the glass as if pulled by a memory. This was the room. This was the view. The very spot where Mark had stood on the night he discovered her cleaning up after someone else, long after the world had stopped paying attention. She rested her hand lightly on the chilly window pane. Then the door opened, and Mark entered alone, his coat slung over one arm, with no assistant behind him. He nodded once as a greeting and gestured toward the chairs by the window. They both sat down. "I wanted to ask you something off the record," he said in a softer tone than usual. Emma waited patiently. "Since the town hall and all that came after, have you felt the company changing?" She paused before answering yes. He examined her face carefully before she nodded in meaningful ways and in ways that lasted. She paused a moment longer before replying, "It depends on what, exactly." On whether we preserve the small moments that brought us here, she explained. Not only initiatives and memos, but those little moments. No one even tracks. Mark leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. This building, he began slowly, was designed with glass walls and open spaces to encourage transparency. I once believed that if people were visible, they would behave accordingly. He gazed out the window and added, "But I have realized something different. Being seen is not the same as being acknowledged. True leadership, true character, those emerge when no one is watching or when only a single person is." Emma's eyes softened. "And sometimes that is enough." He looked at her intently, really looked. "You have reminded this company of that, not by delivering speeches, but by simply showing up and demonstrating what it means." She felt a flush rise behind her eyes, but did not look away. "Ah, you started something," he continued. "We are calling it a ripple, but perhaps it is more. Human Resources has received nearly 24 internal nominations this week for unnoticed contributions, things that never appeared on a slide. People are now noticing the quiet, not just the loud," Emma smiled. "It was never only about me." "No," he admitted, "but you sparked the flame." They sat together in a comfortable silence for a while, one that required no filling. Then Mark rose. "I'm leaving early today." Tonight, for once, Emma Wilson stood quietly by the door. He paused for a moment and said, "One more thing," while she tilted her head in curiosity. "Do not ever believe your story ends with this rotation," he added. "I am watching to see where it goes next, as are others." She nodded calmly, her voice steady. "Then I will make sure it is worth watching." Mark Gallagher offered a rare smile, gentle and quiet, before leaving. Emma turned back toward the window where street lights flickered on one by one. A couple walked by, hand in hand. A cyclist sped past a stopped taxi. Life went on, unknowingly passing beneath a girl who once wondered if she was invisible, now standing at a corner office window, finally seen not by the building but by herself. 2 weeks after the town hall meeting, the rhythm at Gallagher and Finch had shifted into something new. It was not louder or busier, but it had become more purposeful. People still typed quickly, drank bad coffee, and rushed into meetings holding half-stapled printouts. But their movements carried a change. This subtle difference showed in how Connor Lewis from tech support was now invited to client presentations, or how Eva in facilities received a desk plaque, simply stating, "Because you fix more than just what is broken." Emma Wilson did not discuss it openly or lead any campaigns, but the change spread through the company like a gentle undercurrent beneath still water. She was now on her third rotation, deeply integrated with the team. The market insight team faced a demanding schedule and high expectations, yet Emma Wilson thrived under the quiet pressure that molds individuals without breaking them. On a Friday morning, she was in the break room, pouring another cup of tea, when Connor Lewis entered. It had been weeks since they last spoke, if their previous brief exchange could even be called that. He nodded and said simply, "Hey, morning." Emma responded politely, but without enthusiasm. Connor lingered near the coffee machine, staring into his cup. The silence stretched longer than comfortable before he finally met her eyes, which looked more tired than Emma had ever seen. "I heard you have joined the Insight team now," he said. "I just started," Emma replied. Connor nodded once more and glanced around the office floor before returning his gaze to her. After a pause, he swallowed hard and admitted, "You were right about the numbers, about the work." Emma remained silent. "I don't know why I let things happen like they did," he continued. "Maybe I thought no one would care or that no one would notice." "You were half right," Emma whispered. "Most people wouldn't have." He winced but did not argue. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he confessed, "trying to figure out what kind of person I want to be here, what type of leader I could become if I ever deserve that chance." Emma did not soften, but neither did she turn away. "Start with the next task you're given," she said firmly. "Complete it. Do it thoroughly and correctly. That is all anyone can really do." Connor looked at her for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Thanks," he said quietly, grateful for not being condemned. Publicly, Emma Wilson said she did not do it for Mark Gallagher, but for the work itself. Connor Lewis gave a faint smile, hurt, yet thankful, and left the room. Later that afternoon, Colleen stopped by Mia's desk and tossed a binder onto her keyboard. "Final challenge," she announced. "Next up Is the client pitch on Friday. You'll be leading. Emma blinked in surprise. I thought I was just observing. You have observed enough, Colleen replied, before already heading back down the hall. Now, go make someone uncomfortable. Emma smiled. She stayed late that evening, not out of obligation, but because she wanted to perfect it. As the sun set behind the skyline, casting long amber shadows through the 20th floor windows, she stood and stretched. Gazing over the city, she chose not to take the elevator down, but climbed up to the 21st floor instead. The executive level was silent, no footsteps or humming printers, just the soft glow of emergency lights and the deep quiet of after hours. She slowly walked past the boardroom, past Mark Gallagher's closed office, until she arrived at the glass-walled corner room, the very place where this whole ordeal started. The room was empty, but the view remained breathtaking. A full panorama of Chicago at dusk, buildings like statues and streets glowing like veins of light. Emma approached the window she had stood before weeks ago, the same spot where Mark had once silently observed her. Now, she stood there not as someone being watched, but as someone who had learned to truly see. She pulled a small notebook from her bag and prepared herself for what was to come. In her pocket, she carried a well-used moleskin with rounded edges. Flipping to the final page, she penned a sentence. Leadership is not about being noticed. It is about recognizing others and choosing never to look the other way. She tapped the pen twice on the page before gazing outside once more. For the first time since entering this company, she no longer felt like an outsider. Instead, she sensed she belonged to its very structure. Downstairs, someone was vacuuming a corridor. Elsewhere, a night shift custodian organized a pile of neglected documents. Another person replenished paper in the printer. These quiet, almost invisible actions felt insignificant, yet Emma Wilson now understood their true value. Those subtle footsteps were no longer mere background sounds, but the strong foundation beneath everything. She switched off the light, put the notebook away, then walked back into the hallway. When the door clicked softly behind her, the phrase she had once muttered to herself echoed with renewed power. You were important before they noticed you, and now they always will.